Do you want to change the world? So do I. On this show, we meet artists whose work is doing just that. Welcome to Art Heals All Wounds. I'm your host, Pam Uzel. Imagine for a minute that someone wanted to harm you, to kill you, just for being who you are. And they did it. A spur-of-the-moment decision to take your life. And in a miracle of modern medicine, you were brought back with physical wounds that would take years of hospitalization to heal. But the physical wounds were only the tip of the iceberg. You needed to heal the emotional and psychological wounds that went much deeper. But you aren't the same you anymore. Because during that split second you were gone away from your body, you learned a secret. And as you lay in that hospital bed, you weren't alone. The music that sang of the oneness of the universe, music that sings to you about the truth of who you are, it sings and it sings until you have to sing too. Can you hear it? Music that comes from your own heart. That music that sings of a ruthless love for all beings. My guest on this episode, Amikaeyla Gaston, is a force for change. Proclaimed as one of the purest contemporary voices by National Public Radio, Amikaeyla is a public keynote speaker, performer, educator, and author. She travels the world serving as a cultural arts ambassador for the State Department and is the founder of the International Cultural Arts and Healing Sciences Institute and co-executive director for World Trust Educational Services Organization. With over 25 years experience in the behavioral health arena, Amikaeyla has been bringing together artists and healers of all forms and specialties to promote healing and wellness through the arts and activism. She leads corporations, universities, and organizations through cultural competency, restorative justice, and racial equity training designed to facilitate, engage, and support people in exploring challenging conversations. She also does expansive work with political refugees, war survivors, and at-risk populations worldwide, and is often called into difficult scenarios to offer intercultural literacy and deep restorative justice work in support of transformative and peaceful solutions. Ami is remarkable, and I'm very excited that she is joining me on the podcast to share her story. Hi, Ami. Thank you so much for being on this episode of Art Heals All Wounds. Can you start by introducing yourself? Just tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Pam. I'm so excited to be here with you. My name is Amikaeyla Gaston. And, I just believe so strongly in healing on an ultimate level. I found over these many, many years that the power of music ties into the power of letting go of pain and hatred and tapping into that place of forgiveness. When you're trapped in hatred and you really get stuck, you can't really heal. I found that, going through the death and rebirth cycle that I went through when I was killed in a hate crime and came back, that the only way that I could heal was through the power of forgiveness and peace and resolution, and, took a leap to evolve. And step into the power of manifesting community and connection through healing, through music.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to have to explain part of that last statement you said. You were killed in a hate crime.
Absolutely. I survived a near fatal hate crime where I was purposefully run over and killed by 5 white men in a truck who saw this brown woman sitting in a field of flowers. Funnily enough, I was wearing a t-shirt, a tie-dye t-shirt that said "Flower Child" on it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go sit in a field of flowers and be a true flower child. And they saw me and they ran me over in a truck and they dragged me hundreds of feet on a gravel road. And I got lodged underneath that truck, which crushed my ribs, punctured my lungs, damaged all my internal organs. And I got third-degree burns because I was stuck between the wheel and the exhaust on 70% of my lower body. And I actually died that day. And I came back that day and I spent many more days undergoing surgeries and blood transfusions and being immobilized for months and months and months in ICUs and burn units. And out of that murderous, dastardly deed acted out on me, born out of hatred and racism, not only made me a survivor, which takes, pure grit and perseverance and resolve and determination and tenacity, but a thriver as well, honey. And when I left my body and sailed over the road and the people and the trees and up to the clouds with the birds and the setting sun, I saw through all of my senses the connections of everything, all of us, to each other and the universe. And I was literally given this massive, miraculous meta perspective on how to tap into the blessing of that opportunity to connect with the universe and our universal self. And, in that flow state, I could literally feel the clouds. They had like a tactile presence and the air was rushing and coursing through me. And as I soared and I was flying, I heard this beautiful music and it was ethereal and ephemeral and gorgeous and harmonic and truly, I can't even describe it. But in that moment, I actually got good with dying. And so as I was like, oh, I could stay here. I don't have to fight it anymore, is when I returned back to my broken body. But I knew that my connection to the universe made me ruthlessly connected to the soul of what lies beneath. And that in order to heal and get back out into the world again, I needed to honor that God force within me while animating this energy within myself to be ruthlessly in love with myself as an individual, but people around the world. And you can choose to have a ruthless love for all and all beings, no matter what, or you could choose to stay stuck. And on this, I'm clear, it's a choice. And in dying, I realized I didn't have time for people who aren't in tune with being their own real heartfelt self and loving and letting others be their fully real heartfelt self. That washed away with the accident. And that's where I stand today.
Well, it's really a remarkable story. And one thing I'm really curious about is that you have a beautiful voice. And I'm assuming that you had that beautiful voice before this accident, but some transformation happened as you were healing about your voice, what it could be for, as opposed to just sounding really lovely when you sing a song. And can you tell me a little bit about what you decided you could use your voice for?
That is a really powerful question. I think I really realized that it wasn't just my voice. It was, there's so many stories about near-death experiences. People go to the light of their understanding, they float to the sky, or they go to their parents' bedroom or whatever it is. But what I hadn't heard a lot about was the sounds that you hear in this state. And for me, the sounds that I heard were just perfect harmony. And all of the notes became one. It wasn't separate voices making one sound. It was all one sound. It was all of the sounds of the universe that weren't cacophonous. They were woven together in a way that was the fabric of the existence of life itself, the manifestation of organic matter. And I think that I hold that to be true. It doesn't matter how my voice sounds or doesn't sound. It doesn't matter whether you can sing or not sing. Everyone has their own authentic expression. It's truly our fingerprint. Our voices and vocal patterns are a fingerprint. And no matter how it sounds, the blessing of that, the world is not the same sound without your sound in it as well. And so hearing that and thinking about that, singing just became another way for me to augment my fingerprint on the fabric of life and encouraging others to sing from their soul and not necessarily get trapped with but I don't sound as good without the shower around me, or I sound way better in the car. We get so shy around how we sound that we limit and inhibit ourselves from sharing our gift with the world. And so I think that's what it was for me. It was less about sing because I like to sing. It was more like sing because everybody can sing. Everybody can sing. If you can talk, you can sing. Even if you can't talk, you can sing. Just humming, the heartbeat of your body, whether you make a sound or not, is part of that fabric of sound. And that thrills me to no end. It's magical. It's like the magic of gravity. You can't see it, but you know it exists. So you can't necessarily hear everything all at once or see everything all at once, but you know all at once is happening. And all of the things in the all at onceness of it all is what makes the now of it. I know that sounds kind of like far out and reaching, but there's something so true to seeing a tree outside and knowing that it's alive, but it's as still as anything. But it's so much is happening inside the embodiment of that tree. I don't know if any of that makes sense, girlfriend, but yeah.
It makes sense to me. And there's a phrase that I think you have perhaps led workshops in called music is medicine or music as medicine.
Music as medicine.
Have you done workshops?
Yes.
Music as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to talk about this. You did talk about it a little bit, but how is music medicine and how does it work? Why does it work? And what do you do at these workshops?
Well, honestly, these workshops are about that very thing, finding your truth in your own authentic expression. So it's more than just singing. We might never not ever get to singing. We just might get into the space of someone sharing their story, someone healing from a traumatic experience and telling it to people that have never known them before. And quite honestly, when we realize that we are all part rock, part animal, part vegetable, part mineral, if I peeled off your skin and showed you, saw your protons and electrons and cells working in harmony and you saw mine, we would all be one being together. And so the music as medicine is the remembrance of the oneness of us, our inclusion, our identical state. And so being in difference and in dissonance and discord causes dis-ease. And that's the medicine of it. We want to be in alignment. And the way that we show that alignment is through the magic of sound, the joy of music. It surpasses, the boundaries of language. It moves into the place where all form is flow form. And we lose these false dichotomies of binary thinking, Black versus white, women versus men, us versus them. We embrace this all-encompassing kaleidoscope mind. And in the recognition of that and reconnecting to ourselves intrapersonally and with each other interpersonally, there's a healing that happens. And it often takes music and art as advocacy and music as medicine to have people tease those boundaries away and allow for that play to happen.
Well, it's really interesting because I think I have your biography right. You were going into medicine when this crime was committed against you.
That's right.
And I don't know, I haven't heard if you did finish your medical training or if you took this idea of healing in this new direction, but I do know that you've traveled around the world to a lot of places that desperately need healing. And I'm wondering if you can share some examples of those travels and what you've seen happen in terms of helping people to heal in this way?
It's interesting. I grew up in a family of doctors. And so Western medicine was just infused in the beingness of our daily days. And I've always, been intrigued with complementary medicine, but it was always kind of viewed as like, take some echinacea, but then once you get really sick, you better go to the doctor. Like it was very much so the nice try portion of the program. But once I became a patient, and I was a patient in the hospital for years, almost a year and a half to 2 years, realizing that there's a way that our medical system doesn't embrace what it takes to really get people to heal body, mind, and spirit. It's very much so in the handle the immediacy of it. And so when I got out of the hospital and I went to medical school, dragging my books behind me while I'm walking on crutches or in a wheelchair, and they would say things like, you only have 6 to 9 minutes with each patient, I was horrified. And I was like, that is an absolute aberration of my concept of healing. I don't agree. I don't think that it has to be that way. And I understand on the one hand why, you have to keep the beds going and all the rest of these things, but it didn't align with my concept of healing after that accident. And so I knew I had to go. And so I stayed for 2 years. I gathered all the knowledge that I needed to gather, and I knew that I needed to go out and do the type of healing that felt comprehensive in the way that I saw it, in the way that I experienced it. And the way that I experienced it was more about building community and healing prior to the absolute need to go to a hospital. And so that level of healing of heart, that healing of culture and community, that healing of togetherness is where I wanted to focus my energies. And so I did. And so then I would go, I've been to places like Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Rwanda, Nigeria, these places where war has ravaged that sense of community and connectedness, and put it into that kind of survive versus thrive mode, and bringing back to that space. Well, not bringing back, it's there, but serving as a joyful momentary reminder that there's healing in taking a break and being in community through song, through drum, through story, through sharing, through remembering. And there's a story that I tell a lot about a woman who was a refugee from Iraq, and she was so frozen in the amber of fear and in post-traumatic stress, and she just was so broken. She could not say anything else except, I have no memory, only sadness. Anytime anyone would ask her a question, what does she think about this? What does she think about that? She could only recite that over and over again. And I just started singing to her, Ishe Oluwa Konebajeo. And she didn't understand what I was saying. It's a language that she's never heard before, but she could feel my intention and my heart space and my love for her and my desire to bring her peace, my desire to help her heal this deep, deep wound. And she just started crying. And then suddenly all these memories flooded back around, her grandchildren that were still trapped in Iraq, and, the loss of the date trees that, because of the bombs. And we don't really talk about these additional elements of cultural erasure and what war does to people more than just, the loss of life. It's the loss of land, it's the loss of culture, loss of traditions, loss of connectivity to place, to home, and having to flee. And it's so apropos now with what's going on in the Ukraine, like people are just picking up and running for their lives. And when they land, wherever they land, you're stuck in the loss of it all and not knowing how to get back to home and the normalcy of home and the simplicity of that. And when you realize that you think home is simple, but home is really everything. So it's very complex. And when you lose it, you lose so many pieces of yourself. And so music brings that back, the allowance of the memory of that without words, just through sound and the desire to be enveloped in something that holds you beyond the inadequacies of language.
That's so beautiful. And it just makes me think of how mothers and fathers, parents in general, sing lullabies to their children long before speech develops.
That very
Yeah.
soothing place. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you've done so much diplomatic work through the State Department. And are there any initiatives you see that you think are heading in the right direction in terms of really providing a sense of healing for people who've undergone the traumas of war and violence of this kind?
I think that there are organizations, like I'm partnered with an amazing organization called Company E, and they're a dance company, and their focus is, cultural diplomacy through art. And so we've co-created a program called Broadway Bound, where we go to these places and we teach people who are hungry to not just learn the music of Broadway, but to have conversation around what it looks like to be, even if you're like, for example, West Side Story, The Sharks and the Jets, there is a moment where you learn how, intercultural literacy comes through music. It's shown through music. You can talk about things that are challenging and talk about through music and dance and theater and art. And so we've created these spaces where we teach people Seasons of Love, and we talk about what that means and why that song is important. And in the context of that program, what it means to be gay, what it means to be poor, what it means to be. So you have all these larger conversations that burble from a song. And to me, instead of sitting down and going, today we're going to talk about cultural literacy, it's so dry, it doesn't touch the heart. But when you do things where it starts off from the place of art, and art as advocacy and music as medicine, people are much more engaged, they're much more committed, they're much more awake. All parts of their being are more open to the conversation, that when you start singing and playing and you share and you connect, then you can have conversations that go, oh yeah, this is, why are we fighting? Why are our countries fighting? And so part of the initiatives that happen through the Foreign Services Institute for the cultural programming is that, building bridges where there were none before through the arts. And I think that it's brilliant. And it's how people who never would come together do, in honor of music, in honor of these things. And, you hear so many ways that, in war, the first thing to get attacked and blown up is the Palace of Fine Arts, where art happens and music. The soul of a nation, the soul of a people is through the arts. And when that gets obliterated, it's more that it's a reminder that it's more than woo-woo music or woo-woo dance or, extra on top. It's the crux and the core of it all. Can you imagine a world without music and art and dance and theater and joy and laughter? It would be just completely ridiculous.
Exactly. And there's one thing that I've read associated with you, that in this, while we're talking about healing of communities, you said that the desire for community healing has to be internal or come from within the community. Am I getting that idea right? Or did I make that up that you said that? I think that you did have some idea.
Probably. And even if I didn't, it's in the zeitgeist, and I agree completely. I do think so. I think it has to come, its most authentic space is from within. And so if we're given an opportunity to step into a committed conversation because people from within the community want to do it, that's where you're going to affect the most change. Otherwise, it's superimposed. And the goal of true transformative healing and learning and growing is something that has to come from an idea that stemmed from internally within the community. Otherwise, we're coming and be like, let's put on a show. It's just, the let's put on a show moment. As opposed to let's grow and change and build bridges together.
Right. Well, I'm really curious about where you see both yourself and some of these ideas going from here. I think we've been saying this for several years, but we are in a transformative time.
We are.
We're all creating this reality together. So, what do you see both for yourself and for this type of healing?
I think it is our opportunity to use the arts to broaden our field of scope and remove our myopic blinders and see more of the world and the people in it through the eyes and stories of others, and to see ourselves and others as all one. So we don't have a single story, a single perception, a single perspective. That's really dangerous in how stereotypes are formed and microaggressions occur. It really just comes from a place of not knowing and not seeing each other in each other, seeing ourselves in each other. And, we're here because we're being called to see and find the immeasurable value in sharing and hearing our own voices as well as the voices of others. So how do we step into the invitation to embrace a broader perspective and break free from old thought patterns and habits and assumptions and expand our minds and our assumptions and authentically express ourselves boldly and bravely and get out of our comfort zone and find ways to talk about things that are hard to share and say. And, when I'm feeling afraid and alone, I have to remember. I actually remember a lullaby that my grandmother used to sing. She used to sing, by and by, when the morning comes, my sweet mama will carry me home. She will tell me the story of how we overcome, and we'll understand it better by and by. And it would soothe me so. There was such hope and despair. And, I remember those things. I remember those ways that when I was a child, I might not have understood, but I knew, even though it wasn't seen, it was known. And that kind of faith and belief is, I think, the power that music holds to transform our communities and our world. I mean, honestly, you think about Harriet Tubman, honey. I often think about the grit that she had to muster for real to go into the dark forest, not knowing which way she was going, but feeling the lichen on the trees and, really believing that the direction she was going was going to take her to freedom. So much so that she came back and got 245 more. So, really, how do we manifest that level of being beyond these ists and isms that trap us in our body wrappers, and remember our own path to courage, our own intrepid spirit, our own way that we are here because our ancestors made it and their ancestors made it, and we're here because of a grand success story. And that is something to be proud of and to believe and to remember. And we often forget it, but we can remember through music and story and these ways that we hold, like you said, lullabies in this sacred space of, you hear a lullaby, it's time for bed. It's time to be soothed. It's time to be rocked and held. And, as you go into this vulnerable state of sleep, that you're safe because this lullaby reminds you that it's all good and it will be all good. And I'll see you in the morning.
That's so beautiful. And I love that you are creating this sort of outward ripple effect from the lullaby your grandmother sang to you, and then increasing it so that it includes the entire world. And another thing you said, which I just want to comment on because it was so beautiful, is being able to see others through story. I think you're so right. That is how we develop empathy and compassion, if we can listen to the stories of others. I think that is such a profound thing that should be obvious, but it's not.
That is so true. And whenever I hear stories that just break my heart on the news, I have to remember that in order to love myself fully, I have to love everyone fully, no matter where they are in their growth trajectory on this planet. And so I have to, and because people always ask me, how did you forgive these guys that ran you over, blah, blah, blah. I have to remember that in order for me to grow and continue to grow, I have to believe and sing to their inner child and hope that their spirit is growing past the hatred that they felt that drove them to that act, that dastardly deed, to a place of asking for forgiveness from the universe. Some people are like, oh, karma. But I'm like, actually, it's a really powerful concept to think about how the cycle of energy spirals around you to remind you that accountability is a way of commitment to something larger and more beautiful than that moment of potentially crazed desire. Maybe they were drunk and maybe they were like, let's go have some fun, and maybe blah, blah, blah. But cycling back, hopefully in their reflective space, they're able to go, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that I did that. I hope that I'm being held in forgiveness. And so it's a blessing for me to be able to provide that present. I don't want to hate you. I want to love your spirit and hope the best for you, because that ripples back to me as well, and then allows me to ripple it out to the community. And if we all kind of swirled in this cosmic soup of delicious positive vibrations to send out to everyone, what war would not exist anymore, right? And some people are like, oh, Amikaeyla, you're so woo-woo. But, quite honestly, let's step into the woo.
Right. Well, if I'm being honest, I'm going to have to sit with that because I don't forgive them on your behalf.
And I love that righteous rage.
Yeah, I'm holding a lot of anger over that. But listening to you is helping, but I do have a little bit of anger clutched in my fist right now.
And I hear you, and I appreciate the love that you feel for me. And I am taking the love that you feel for me and composting it into sending it out to them, because I do not want them to do that to anyone else. And the only way that they're going to heal is by knowing that they are loved, even in the wrath of what they've caused. I mean, it is, you hear the phrase turn the other cheek and you're like, yeah, nice try, I'm not doing that. Or you hear the words of Martin Luther King and you're like, wow, I don't know how that's going to happen. And it sounds counterintuitive, and I have to say, like, it is challenging. It is not easy to be like, oh, I just forgive them. It's not, I'm not running around with a halo on my head and, magic fairy dust. It takes work. It takes focus. It takes belief in the unseen, and the power of love is bigger than everything else. Music is love in sound. It's bigger than everything else. If we can't believe in that, then we can't believe in change. We can't believe that the world can be healed. We can't believe that the waters can be cleaned. We can't believe in a lot of things that feel so huge that we don't know how. But if we get stuck in the how, we won't do the what. And the what is, what we want is a world that is safe for little girls to walk down the street in the middle of the night and not be petrified that they are going to be harmed in some way. And little boys. Why is that such a far-fetched philosophy? The only way to get to that is by loving everyone so strongly that hopefully they shift to a place of being better people.
Okay. Well,
I know it's big. I tell you what, but you know what? I just don't know how else to hold it.
yeah, I hear you, and I'm gonna hold that myself and let it resonate for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would love to talk to you all day, but can you tell people where they can find out more about you, how they can contact you about your work? Give us all this info, because I think what you're doing is incredibly important.
Thank you so much. And I just have to say, I'm so appreciative for your willingness to share these things that you learn from other people, Pam, out in the world through this show. And, it's vital for us to have these touchstones of positivity. One touchstone I want to tell people, you can reach me at my Facebook.
Okay. Well, thank you so, so much. I feel like I've been on a 3-day retreat just from this conversation. So thank you.
It does feel like that, doesn't it? And thank you for having me, Pam. I truly am so appreciative. And I send out light and love to all of your fabulous listeners. And Thank you so much for being who you are in the world.
Abre mi corazón with the language of love. I can see that the flowers and the trees and the birds and the bees, they all know how to speak. Oh, to the opening, and you call me to respond. I can't see with my eyes, or my ears, or my arms, or my tongue. I can only feel. Oh, with my heart. Oh, with my heart.
You're listening to Art Heals All Wounds. I'm so grateful to Amikaeyla Gaston for joining me on this podcast. Her perspective on forgiveness really challenged me, and I mean that in the best way. It's something that I'll be sitting with for a long time. I hope that her story inspired you in some way. Remember to look for her on Facebook if you want to connect or follow her work. This is the first episode of Season 3. Thank you so much for listening. If you appreciate the work being done by the artist of this podcast and the work I do to bring these stories to you each week, please follow the show in whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. Sharing it with a friend is the best way to help me grow. The music you've heard in this podcast is by Quetzal and Lobo Loco. The beautiful music in the intro is Abre mi Corazón by Amikaeyla Gaston. This podcast was edited by Eva Hristova. This podcast is recorded in Oakland, California, on the unceded territory of the Chochenyo Ohlone people.